Residents know that when faced with a fire or medical emergency, they only need to dial 911 and the Huron Fire Department will respond immediately. Although the quick response of today's fire department is expected, even take it for granted, there was a time when Huron lacked any fire protection at all. In its infancy, Huron relied on the men of the village to form bucket brigades to fight fires. Even though the village council passed an ordinance in 1873 establishing a fire company, not much changed. Fires were still fought by volunteer bucket brigades. The village improved its fire protection by purchasing an 1858 hand-pumped, hand-drawn fire engine for over $1,300, $1,000 of which was paid for the engine itself. In June of 1881, the Huron Village Council voted to sell the engine because they didn't think it worked very well. The nearby town of New London, which boasted a population of over 2,000, twice the population of Huron, expressed interest in buying the engine. Huron's town fathers believed the equipment useless and gladly sold it to New London for $8,500. At least one resident questioned the wisdom of selling the fire engine. In an article in the Huron Reporter of September 22, 1881, the writer observed that the village was now without any protection at all, except for the ineffective bucket brigade, and if a building did catch fire, there would be no way to prevent it in spreading to adjacent buildings. He also reported that New London had repaired the supposedly unfixable fire engine and had used it to fight several fires. He wrote, "The buildings here are mostly of wood, and should one of them catch fire, it is evident the flames would spread to the surrounding buildings, and any effort of our citizens to subdue them would be almost futile." He also raised the issue of higher prices for fire insurance because of the village's inadequate fire protection. The writer contended that if Huron had a fire engine, insurance rates would be lower, which would more than pay for the purchase of a new fire engine. He concluded that he was unsure why the council sold the old fire engine, unless it intended to buy another. As that did not appear to be the case, he wondered if the town's government believed Huron did not need fire protection. "We will venture no reason, but simply state that we are at the mercy of the flames and insurance companies. Something should be done to protect us." Unfortunately, the fears of many were realized late one June night in 1885, when fire destroyed several buildings in Huron's business district, causing $25,000 worth of damage. The fire was discovered by Mrs. Perry, who lived above Shepherd's Billiards Saloon and was awakened by the whining of her dog. The fire began in a dilapidated shed and spread to nearby buildings in just 10 minutes. Among the destroyed properties were 2 livery stables, a grocery, 2 meat markets, 2 boot and shoe stores, the billiards room, and all of the homes of the tenants who lived above those businesses. Further damage was prevented due to the strenuous efforts of the bucket brigade, as well as several brick buildings that served as firewalls among the wooden buildings, and the presence of a west wind rather than an east wind, which could have potentially spread fire across the entire downtown. Fortunately, animals and occupants were rescued along with some of the building's contents. It was immediately expressed to the village council that brick should be the material used in rebuilding the blocks of mercantile and tenant buildings. The village council's neglect to secure fire protection had even more disastrous consequences in November of the following year, when a fire broke out in John Barham's fish house along the river. The fire was spotted by a man on the tugboat American Eagle, which had docked for the night at Wickham Company, located just north of Barham's fish house. The alarm was sounded, and Huron's residents rushed to the river, but because the flames were so advanced and the village still lacked adequate firefighting equipment, all they could do was watch helplessly as the buildings burned to the ground. The resulting damage was catastrophic. Barham's fish house burned quickly, and the south extension of Wickham & Company's building followed. The flames then consumed Wickham & Company's main 3-story building, which was filled with the season's catch. The financial loss was huge, totaling $21,000, and included 500 tons of frozen, salted, and fresh fish worth $16,000, and the $6,000 building. Fortunately, the building and its contents was insured for $16,200. The smell of burnt fish and fire permeated the air for weeks to come. This fire prompted the Huron Village Council's Fire Committee to schedule a meeting to discuss the organization of a fire company. All citizens were invited, with the young men of the community especially encouraged to attend. In December of 1886, a permanent group of fire laddies was formed. Officers were elected, and the company was named the Huron Rescue Fire Company. 25 volunteers were recruited to join the company. 2 years later, in 1888, the council revisited the 1873 ordinance that created the first fire brigade and added a provision to include the payment of $1 each month to no more than 25 volunteers, who attended monthly training drills in the use of firefighting apparatus and actively answered fire calls. The twine and fish houses along the Huron River were notorious for catching fire. In 1903, the W.C. Hayman Fish and Ice House and the Hermes and Scott Fish House were destroyed by fire. Fortunately, the Wickham Fish Company suffered minimal damage, but a fire in 1912 badly damaged the Kishman Fish Company. Tarred fishing nets, sawdust used for storing ice, and other combustible materials made the fires almost impossible to control. To help improve Huron's firefighting capability, the village bought a chemical fire engine in 1904 from the Sutphen Company in Columbus, which is still in business today. This was the latest in firefighting equipment with both hand and horse-drawn models. The system typically consisted of a copper tank in which there was a mixture of baking soda and water. Within the tank, a powerful acid, such as sulfuric acid, was stored in a glass jar. The machine was activated by pulling a lever to break the glass jar. This would release the acid into the soda water, which in turn initiated a chemical reaction that released carbon dioxide gas. The reaction created enough pressure to force the water out of the tank through the hose. The chemical fire engine was used to fight the Oddfellow Block building fire in 1909 that destroyed several buildings and businesses. Huron's Fire Department continued to grow as its services became more essential to the community. In 1908, a 3-story addition was built on the back of the town hall, with the first floor used to store the village's fire equipment. A year later, a water purification and pumping plant was constructed on the east side of the cove north of South Street, and a large supply tank was built behind the town hall. The steam-powered water plant was used to activate the town's fire alarms. The number of blasts from the whistles indicated to the firemen the location of the fire. This method of summoning firefighters was employed until 1923, when an electric siren was installed on top of the town hall. In 1915, the village purchased a horse-drawn hose and ladder wagon from the city of Elyria. One account says the fire department contracted with 2 nearby residents who owned horses. Whichever team reached the fire station first would draw the wagon to the fire, and the driver would be paid for his work. Another says a member of the fire department, George Knott, who lived on Ohio Street near the fire department, owned the team of horses who pulled the wagon. The house and barn are still owned by a member of the Knott family. In 1920, Huron's first fire chief, Hank Schaefer, was appointed, earning $50 a year. When he retired in 1935, Frank Wilkes Sr. became chief. Wilkes had been the assistant chief since 1922. When he retired in 1940, Wilkes was replaced by Lawrence Kreck, who served in the position for a year before retiring. He was succeeded by Melvin Dahlhofer in 1941. He served until retirement in 1966, after 32 years in the department. The village purchased its first motorized fire engine, a Buffalo Larrabee pumper from the Buffalo Machine Company of Buffalo, New York, in 1925. Members of the village council made trips to several fire truck manufacturing plants in Ohio, Indiana, and New York before deciding to purchase the Buffalo Larrabee pumper. The new pumper had a pumping capacity of 400 gallons per minute and cost $5,600. It was the first Buffalo pumper to operate in Ohio. It had a cylinder Red Seal Continental motor mounted on a 2.5-ton Larrabee chassis. The pumper was tested after its arrival to Huron and pumped water continuously for 6 hours and 55 minutes. Because it was motorized, the village hired 3 drivers, Oswald Gall, Ralph Lippis, and Fred Bacon. Mr. Gall was also responsible for maintaining the engine at the rate of $1 an hour.
I currently own Huron's first motorized fire truck, the 1925 Buffalo. The 1925 Buffalo was purchased by Huron in September of 1925. In approximately October of 1924, there was quite a bit of deliberation with Huron City Council, well, the Village Council at the time, talk about replacing their horse-drawn fire cart with a motorized fire truck. They traveled to different manufacturers around the country and ultimately picked the Buffalo Fire Apparatus Corporation, which was out of Buffalo, New York. The truck is on a Larrabee truck chassis. It has a Continental V6 engine in it. The pump on it is a Hale pump, which is a 400-gallon per minute pump. To give you kind of a perspective, pumps on the newer apparatus in these today are anywhere from 1,250 gallons per minute to 2,000 gallons per minute. This truck was a triple combination pumper that also has a chemical. There's two 40-gallon water tanks on it in addition to the Hale pump. There was a chemical mixture that they would mix with those 40-gallon water tanks that would cause a chemical reaction, which could also be used to put out the fires. In July of 22, the fire department here in Huron received an email from the gentleman over on the East Coast who owned this truck, and he wanted to sell it, but he thought he'd contact our department first to see if anybody was interested in buying it. Subsequently, I had several conversations with him, and about a month later, I purchased a truck from him, drove up there, and we trailered the truck back. The reason why I bought the truck, it was part of the history of not only the Huron Fire Department, but also a history of our community, of the Huron community. And I felt that was a touching thing, that we need to bring this truck back to the community where it originally came from. Why did I buy the truck? Ever since I've been a little kid, I've always wanted to be a fireman. As soon as I got out of high school, I started with the Huron Fire Department. I've always been interested in the history of the fire department. I also collect fire memorabilia, fire things, and what more could a guy want than to have his own fire truck?
In August of 1932, the Huron Volunteer Fire Department presented The Fire Brigade, a 4-act comedy drama to raise money for the department's pension and general funds. Directed by the playwright and New York firefighter Captain Harry DeLong, the cast was comprised of Huron residents and members of the fire department. The play was presented 2 nights in the Town Hall Opera House and included a 6-piece orchestra as well as specialty acts performed by the members of the community. In 1934, Huron Township purchased a 500-gallon per minute Mack truck. It came to be known as the Blue Goose because of its blue painted body. At one time, it was said to be the only blue fire engine in the state of Ohio. Although the township owned the truck, the village fire department operated it.
I got on right out of high school. My dad was on at the time, and I used to roll with him or chase fire trucks down. And Chief Zimmerman, John, one time I was out on a fire helping him do something, and he said, "Why don't you just join?" And so I did, and that was maybe 83, 84, and been doing it ever since. My dad was on the department, Larry Stout, and I think he was on probably somewhere 64, 65 he got on, and he was on 25 years before he retired. At one point, I had 2 brothers, myself and my dad were all on the department at the same time. This truck was bought by the township in 1934 as a fire truck, and the township, everybody's always had a thing for this truck because this truck is blue, and it's probably the only blue fire truck you'll ever see. And this is the actual township color that they still have on all their trucks today. And so it got nicknamed the Blue Goose. Bought new in 1934, was in service until 1969. And it's been in Huron Township its whole life. It went from, in 1969 when it quit being in service, it ended up, the Firemen's Association bought it from the township and we made it a parade truck. And it was a parade truck up until, there was some history in between that some things happened that we couldn't use it for a few years, but it was a parade truck up until 2019 until they built this station and dedicated this museum, and the truck got put in here and mothballed. And in parades, we would take as many, back in the day, there was a lot of young families that the kids loved to ride in the parade, and we would take them we put seats in the back of the truck, and we would take as many kids or as many of anybody who was related to anybody on the truck that we could to have them go in the parade. It was always a lot of fun. I mean, I rode it when I was a kid, and I've hauled a lot of kids in the parade, and we've also used it for funerals. The last one we did was Jerry Franklin's funeral, and we actually, Foster has an apparatus that we put in the back of the truck, a regular casket rack, for lack of a better term, that would go in the back of a hearse, and we put it in the back of the truck, and we took him to the cemetery in the back of this truck, all in our Class A uniforms. As a matter of fact, Buzz Bronner was driving. I don't remember who was riding shotgun, but there was two of us in the back standing guard, and it was about 10 degrees outside, and we were in our Class A uniforms, which there's not too much to a Class A uniform, and mine fits too tight to put anything underneath it. So it was, let's say, a very cold ride from the funeral home to the cemetery that day. But it was a very nice dedication. And I wish, excuse me, I wish maybe that when I kick the bucket, they could take me in there, but it ain't gonna happen, because ain't nobody else gonna be able to drive it. The Firemen's Association restored it in the early in 69 it went out of service. It probably got restored somewhere in the neighborhood of 74, 73, 74, and the Firemen's Association did it. I would imagine some of it got done at Tom's Body Shop, which was Tom George on Cleveland Road, and that was the same place that painted our first truck that we painted yellow, got painted at Tom's Body Shop in 1969. And that's, it was an effort from everybody that was on the association at the time to get this. This was made, it's a Mack fire truck. It was actually made by, Mack had their own division that built fire trucks. A lot of current fire trucks, the chassis made by Duplex, or the chassis and the truck's made by somebody else, or we have Freightliners, and then they take it to a fire truck shop and they build a fire truck out of it. But this was actually manufactured by Mack as a fire truck. This would be the second motorized truck that the department had. The first motorized truck was the 1925 Buffalo, which was bought in 1925 and replaced a horse-drawn ladder wagon. There was a story in a reporter about that truck making it to a fire in lightning speed. And I've been in that truck as fast as it goes, is about 25 miles an hour. This one here, if you really push it, you can get it to go 35. Maybe back in the day it might have been 40, but I don't want to push it. I never wanted to push it much past 35. And I can remember riding in a parade. I think my dad was driving and I was sitting in the middle between the two seats, which isn't very big. Half of me wouldn't fit in there now. And the siren was going off and nobody could figure out why. It was because I was sitting on it. I was sitting on the siren button and we couldn't get it to shut off until we figured out that's why. So it's just always been, it's just always had a special place for me.
In the mid-1970s, the Blue Goose was a frequent and much beloved fixture in area parades, carrying several Sesame Street characters brought to life by Chief Oak's three daughters, Cindy, Bonnie, and Carol.
My little niece loved Sesame Street, and we thought, what can we do? Let's make Sesame Street costumes and be in the parade, the Water Festival parade, okay? And at first we looked at each other like, what? We had too much beer, you know, we're thinking, what? Then we thought, no, Bonnie sewed, my sister sewed really good, let's do this. We decided we're gonna go out and get some material and we're gonna make Big Bird, Cookie Monster, Bert and Ernie, okay? So we get out, we buy this. At that time, the shaggy rugs and stuff were on the shaggy material, you know what I mean, was a big deal. So we were able to put Big Bird together with, we got some material, we had it planned. Then we went out and we got the blue stuff for Cookie Monster. We had that planned. And then we got a styrofoam cooler that was a elongated one for Bert, and a styrofoam, or a colander, two colanders for Ernie. And while we're dreaming all this stuff up, we would take, each weekend, we would get together at my sister's house, and we would dream up what we were going to make. Well, then we had to sew. None of us sewed but Bonnie. So I remember
Cindy
drinking a few beers and cutting newspaper and trying to pin stuff and laughing that we're doing this. We were creating Sesame Street. Well, then my oldest sister got wind of that, and she said, I can make Oscar the Grouch and Snuffleupagus. So before you knew it, we had Big Bird, we had Cookie Monster, Bert and Ernie, Snuffleupagus, and Oscar the Grouch. And then I think my sister Bonnie said, because she was married to Buzz, her husband then, and he was a fireman. And I think they dreamed up the fact that let's get the Blue Goose. And George Smith was always in charge of the Blue Goose. Well, Buzz said something to George, and George says, we can do this. We got our costumes all made. We put them on. We brought the Blue Goose for the first time to my mom's house. We decorated it. We put big signs, Sesame Street on the side. We got the boom box was big back then, so we got a big boom box and we put it in the back of the truck and we played the Sesame Street song, okay? And we started out, and those costumes were hot. They were hotter than, oh my God, at 90 degrees, 80 degrees in the summer, but we did it. We put them on, and we turned that music on, and we started in the parade. And I'll tell you what, it was the biggest thrill of my life to see the kids running out in the street yelling, Bert, Ernie, Big Bird, Oscar. And my sister was in a garbage can, and she'd open the lid and jump out. In the back of the truck, she was Oscar the Grouch. And my little niece was Snuffleupagus, but she didn't last too long, but we tried to get her in that. But George Smith was Gooner, and he had that hat on, and he was driving, and he was so happy. Driving away, waving, and we had the best time. That was our first parade. From then on, we ended up we were winning trophies. We went to Norwalk, we went to Wakeman, we went all over the place in parades. But the kids loved us. We would dance in the back of the truck and everything. It was something. But the funny thing about this was, okay, we're high school kids, okay? We're a little mischievous, you know, we have our moments. And after the Water Festival parade, George, I'm not sure, I know George it was a 6-pack of beer, and we were all old enough to drink, and we cracked open those bottles. Well, we were in Norwalk one day, and we had to have a beer, a cold one. We cracked open the beer, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden we thought, hey, we're Sesame Street. Here we have our costumes, our heads off. We got, no, we can't do this. Yeah. That was funny because George was going, oh, no, he's just laughing. Oh, he was fun. George was so much fun. No generation gap with George. He was fun.
First wife.
And so George couldn't wait to get the truck. Now, I want to tell you this, just about 10 years ago, I was in my late 50s or early 60s. George come up to me and he said, you don't have those costumes anymore, do you? I said, oh my gosh, George, no. I says, you know, over time people borrowed them and they fell apart, but I still have Big Bird, and I still do to this day. And I said, George, no we don't. He goes, oh darn it, we ought to get the Blue Goose and do that again. That's how much fun he liked that. And I said, George, I'd probably have a heart attack. But that's the story of the Blue Goose in Sesame Street, and we were very well known, and we won first place and second place trophies at every place we went. And I know us girls, we were all so excited to be, you know, for those kids. I mean, it really hit you, you know. You thought you were doing a joke. You started out as a big joke, and it turned into, like, you know, it was heartwarming. Yeah, I had little kids come up and dance with me, and I'd get off the truck and dance with them in the street. Yeah, it was fun. You don't see that now, but yeah.
The necessity of a well-equipped fire department became apparent in the 1940s, when the department averaged 100 to 125 calls a year. One of the largest fires occurred in 1946 when the Hoke building on South Main Street burned. The firemen fought the blaze for 5 hours before it was controlled. The building housed the Farm Bureau office and store on the first floor and the residence of Mr. and Mrs. Neil Hoke on the second floor. Despite having the use of both the Buffalo and the Blue Goose fire trucks, the fire burned rapidly, and the building and its contents was a total loss. The firemen concentrated on saving the Farm Bureau's grain elevator located just east of the Hoke building, which sustained minor damage. The fire department increased its firefighting capability in 1949 with the purchase of a new pumper from the Maxim Fire Company in New York. The truck had a 750-gallon per minute pump and could carry 300 gallons of water. It was also the first enclosed cab engine owned by the village. The new pumper replaced the 1925 Buffalo, which was sold to Kelly's Island. The village now owned 2 modern trucks, and the township owned the Blue Goose. Both pumpers could be used at a fire, but only one was initially dispatched, depending on the location of the fire and its severity.
I also own the 1949 Maxim fire truck that Huron had, which replaced this 1925 Buffalo. I had bought this truck back in 1990. The Maxim fire truck served the city from 1949 until about 1977. In 1977, the city had sold the truck to one of our part-time firefighters, Bob Lieblein, from Holiday Harbor Marina. I had bought that truck from him, like I said, in 1990. The truck does need to be restored, and I'm ultimately going to be restoring that truck as well.
In 1961, a significant change in the alarm system was instituted. The telephone company provided a special telephone ring at each fireman's home. The police dispatching desk at the Hotel Huron rang the homes of Huron's 20 firemen to alert them of the location of the fire, so they didn't have to first report to the fire station at the town hall. The phones, however, did not replace the siren atop the city hall, which was still used to alert firemen who were not at home. With the new phones, the response time to the scene of the fire or station was much faster. In January of 1962, Huron Township trustees collaborated with the village to provide fire protection services to both the city and the township. The township housed some of the city fire equipment and bought new apparatus, equipment, and fire trucks, and the city provided the firefighters. In 1963, the trustees purchased a custom-built Sutphen pumper equipped with a 750-gallon per minute front-mounted pump and tank with capacity for 800 gallons of water. It replaced the Blue Goose, which is currently on display at Fire Station 2 on Bogart Road. With the help of the Huron City Council, the township purchased a pressure pump to serve as Huron's first fire truck to respond to grass fires, as well as a 2.5-ton Chevrolet chassis with an 1,800-gallon water tank. In 1966, Chief Dahlhofer retired after 32 years in the department. Assistant Chief William Oakes, having spent 5 years at the post, was appointed as the acting chief.
But some of Bill Oakes' family, I don't remember all the Oakes that were on the fire department, but there has been somebody related to Bill on for most of the history of the fire department, which would have been pre-Bill or after Bill. But Bill is the one that always stood out to me. He was a mountain of a man back in the day. He was just a big, tall, broad-shouldered man, and very, very nice, but you didn't want to get on his bad side either.
Except for the chief, the Huron Fire Department was staffed by volunteers. By 1961, the population of Huron had reached 5,000 residents, allowing the village to transition into a city. Huron established a city charter, a city council, and hired its first city manager, Dean Sheldon. In 1969, Sheldon asked City Council to establish a full-time fire department which would provide emergency ambulance services as well as fire protection. Previously, ambulance service was provided by the town's funeral director, Ron Wieland, who used a station wagon as an ambulance and was assisted by a friend or neighbor when needed. New government regulations mandated that the ambulance meet specific standards and be staffed by trained first aid professionals. Whelan could not justify the cost to purchase such a vehicle and hired trained staff, so the Huron Fire Department agreed to provide the service.
Ron Whelan had the ambulance service from to the funeral home over across the street until we became here. For the first year, we had to use his ambulance. We'd get a call, we'd have to go across the street to get it. So then in 1970, we purchased the first one we had from a place in Columbus, a rescue squad service. They built them, I should say. And we purchased that one. And 2 years later, we got the second one.
Sheldon appointed Phil Thomas as Huron's first full-time fire chief. Thomas, who was an assistant chief at Sharon Township Fire Department in Worthington, Ohio, had 19 years of fire service experience. He hired 2 full-time firemen, Captain George Smith and Lieutenant Lester Brownell, both members of the Huron Volunteer Fire Department. Smith oversaw the ambulance service, and Brownell began the city's fire prevention and inspection program. The remainder of the department continued as volunteers. Most of the volunteer firefighters were certified as EMTs. To complete the transition, the fire department's name was changed to the Huron Fire Division.
We had a chief and assistant chief, so I was under them as captain of the volunteer fire department. Then when I became full-time, like I said, I was still captain, but we had the chief and he was full-time chief, so he was here all the time. Yeah, Lester Brownell started about 2 weeks after I did. Lester Brownell was head of prevention, and we worked back and forth a lot. I took prevention courses. I went down to Ohio State to do that. So, and we worked back and forth real good that way. We was the only 2 full-time guys for, I'd say, 5 years or more. Then they went to hired 2 more, and they went from there. You know, kept growing every year by a couple of additionals every year. We had that tower truck, ladder truck over there. We bought that about 1985 or 84, 85. Everybody laughed at us for getting it. Said, we don't have no buildings that tall. We'd rather stay on that and fight a house fire instead of putting a ladder up to a house. And if that wall would cave in, you'd fall in. So that's the main reason we got the ladder truck. When I was in the back, working in the back, a woman was expecting. And I guess her water broke before we got there. So, but anyway, I got to deliver the baby before we got to the hospital. It was the old Good Samaritan hospital, and by the time we got there, I was holding the baby in my arms, and the nurses come out, took care of the lady. And I said, what about me with this one? I'll just bring him on in, he said. They said so.
Upon his arrival in Huron, Chief Thomas initiated several new programs. In late 1969, each firefighter was given a portable plectron tone-controlled radio that alerted them of fire and squad calls, making them less dependent on their home phones and the siren. A plectron was a specialized VHF-UHF single-channel emergency alerting radio receiver used to activate emergency response personnel and disaster warning systems. The radios purchased by the Huron Fire Department were rechargeable and portable. Many of the programs Thomas introduced are still in use today. He began a poster contest during Fire Prevention Week to encourage school children to create fire safety posters. A summer safety town program was established for children entering kindergarten in the fall. Chief Thomas instituted fire drills at the schools to emphasize the importance of public fire education. He also changed the color of the fire trucks from red to yellow, making fire trucks and ambulances more visible to pedestrians and drivers. Thomas implemented a division training program that required firemen to meet 2 times per month for drills to maintain their skills and readiness. He also established a fire inspection program for homes and businesses. With the organization of the full-time fire department, the city of Huron and Huron Township once again signed an agreement in 1970 for the city to provide fire protection and ambulance services to the township. When the town hall, which also housed the fire department, was torn down as part of urban renewal, the fire department needed new quarters. In 1970, the fire department was consolidated in the former Bill Beatty garage on the corner of Jim Campbell Boulevard and Main Street just north of Route 2. A trailer served as Chief Thomas's office. At one point, the department's equipment, which consisted of 2 pumpers, a grass fire truck, a tanker, and an emergency squad vehicle, was stored in 4 different locations throughout the city.
Yes, it was in the old town hall here. Urban Renewal took that down. So then we went up on the corner of Main Street up here in Cleveland Road. There used to be a Ford garage there. They moved out, well, we moved in. We had a trailer out front. There was our office. When we got a call, we had to go back into the other building and take whatever vehicle it was, fire or rescue squad. And that happened for maybe 3-4 years. Up there we was. The old town hall had 2 bays, 2 truck bays underneath it, well, on the ground floor, I should say. Like I said, the city went out the front door, the township went out the back door. Up above, we had just a small room. That's where the chief's office was, and our training room, and they had a stove there where we ate our meals during the daytime. And but Lester and I first started, we worked 8 to 4. So the nighttime was dependent on volunteers, it worked out real good because you had a night on and you was off for I don't know how long, maybe a week.
In 1972, Huron Township trustees voted to build a fire substation and township meeting hall on the property the township owned on Bogart Road. The building was funded by the money that the city had paid the township for its interest in the Huron Town Hall, which was demolished as part of urban renewal. Completed in 1973, the new building housed the township's fire trucks and equipment and provided a meeting place for the township trustees. In 1974, the Huron Fire Division moved into its new home. The station was built on the north end of Main Street next to the newly constructed city building. The station was a 1-story, 3-bay garage with doors in the front and back. It was large enough to house all the division's apparatus, equipment, and firemen on duty. Community support for Huron's fire department has always been strong, as evident by the financial assistance for the purchase of the Jaws of Life. The Huron Firemen's Association began a fund drive in 1977 to buy the equipment, which was used to remove car accident victims by quickly shredding and cutting metal. Individuals, businesses, and civic groups generously responded, and the goal of $5,400 was quickly reached. John Zimmerman, who had been a Huron volunteer firefighter since 1971 and had worked 6 years full-time for the Sandusky Fire Department, was appointed chief when Phil Thomas retired in 1982. A native of Huron, Zimmerman continued and strengthened many of the programs instituted by Thomas.
I started in fire service when I got out of the military in 1971. I was a volunteer in Huron from 71 to 77. Then I went full-time in Sandusky from 77 to 82. In 82, I was appointed chief in Huron, and I was the chief in Huron until 2003 when I retired.
When Zimmerman took over the department, there were only 2 full-time firemen. The passage of a fire levy in 1986 enabled the department to add 4 full-time members to provide emergency medical and firefighting services 24/7. They were Otis Buzz Bronner, Larry Stout, Steve Southard, and Steve Osterling. They joined Chief Zimmerman, George Smith, Jim Johnson, and Steve Dirks. Prior to 1986, the Huron Fire Department relied on the Coast Guard station in Marblehead to rescue boaters on the lake, but costly minutes were lost before the Coast Guard boats could reach those in distress. The 16-foot aluminum boat the fire department had purchased in 1983 was intended for beach rescues and was too small to manage the rough waters and high winds of Lake Erie during boat rescues. To rectify the problem, the department purchased a 22-foot Boston whaler.
We got the boat just because we were getting more and more calls out in the lake, and people getting in trouble with their boats and people falling off their boats. And we felt like we should do what our budget would allow, which would keep the firefighters that we're sending out there safe. That's the main thing. You want to bring everybody back home.
The Huron Fire Department addressed the growing need for a dive team in 1989 when Zimmerman and a team of other firefighters were trained and certified in underwater rescue and recovery. That team included Steve Osterling, Monty Tapp, Paul Berlin, Jim Johnson, Steve Southard, Steve Dirks, William Loeffler, and Pat Johnson. Zimmerman believed it was taking too long for divers to reach the scene of accidents and wanted to organize a dive team within the department to reduce response time. The 9 firefighters were certified in basic diving, ice diving, night diving, and rescue and recovery.
I think it was 85 or 86, we started the underwater recovery team. And it was because of a drowning off of Cedar Point that everybody had a hard time getting to, because Sandusky didn't have a dive team, we didn't have a dive team. So we started our dive team, took our training in Toledo, and for years, then I think soon after that, Sandusky started their team and Ottawa County started their team. In '86, we bought a boat. Our first Huron Fire bought a boat. It was a 22-foot Boston whaler set up for rescue. And we used that all the way through my career until we got to, I think 2004 is when Huron bought their current boat, the 30-foot rescue boat they have now. We went up to Toledo and dove in an instructor's pool, and then we went to a quarry north of Toledo, and it was really cold that day. And we took our open water dives. And then we did advanced dive team training in the lake with the same instructor, but we went over to Kelly's Island out in the lake and dove on wrecks. We got a lot of calls initially because nobody else had it. And we went to Port Clinton, we went to, dove on some police things that they thought there were safes, and we found some guns, we went to Vermilion. We went out in the lake, actually, on some calls, but it was because we had the only dive team in the area for the first couple years. We went for, like I said, safes. We went for where they thought weapons were, cars in the river. Here in the river, a couple times people drove in the river, and we went down and hooked it up for them. It was very interesting because you never knew what was going to happen. You can't see anything, but you also have to remember the firefighters are trained when they go in a burning building. You can't see anything. It's not like on TV. You literally can't see your hand in front of your face. You do everything by feel. But that's so we had that training, and we knew we weren't going to see anything. You go in a quarry, you go in the river, you can't see anything. You just have to feel. When you get to where you want to go, you feel around.
The 1990s brought additional changes to the department. A third fireman was added to each shift in 1994, bringing the division to 9 full-time firefighters, Chief Zimmerman, the assistant chief, and about 20 volunteers. An old rescue squad car was refitted to transport the divers, and a trailer was purchased in 1998. 2 new ambulances were added, as were several thermal imaging cameras. In appreciation for the community's long-standing support, the Huron Firemen's Association donated a 6-foot square granite compass located at Lakefront Park. The monument sits on the east edge of the park nearest the water. The upper right corner of the compass describes the distance to Toronto in miles, and the upper left corner marks the distance to Kelly's Island. The lower left corner has the longitude and latitude of Huron. Chief John Zimmerman announced his retirement in 2003, but continued to serve as the building inspector, a position he still holds today. During his tenure as chief, Zimmerman moved the division forward with 24/7 coverage and upgrading equipment. Lieutenant Paul Berlin was selected to become the next chief of the division. Berlin focused on strengthening ties with the other area communities to better serve the public. Among his many accomplishments, he expanded mutual aid agreements with surrounding fire departments, applied for grants to pay for new equipment, provided instruction to new firefighters in the many facets of firefighting, worked with area hospitals to provide better care to patients, and was instrumental in developing the paramedic program in Erie County.
3 years into my career, I was promoted to shift leader lieutenant, so I was running my own shift. We worked on another couple projects. I knew John was getting near the end of his career as chief. So it was something that I had thought about, but I really enjoyed being on shift. And you know, the nature of our job here is that you could be on an ambulance call, you could go on a fire call, you could be on a boat call, rope rescue. You know, you weren't really assigned to one position, so it was really a nice fit for me. I was selected as chief in 2004, late 2003. Before John retired, I approached him with the thought of the warning sirens. With his support, I approached the trustees, and we were the first community in the area to install the warning sirens. They're weather warning sirens. Most people call them the tornado warning sirens, but they're really a notification for an emergency. If you hear the sirens go off, turn your radio on, turn your television on. It's going to give you whatever the emergency might be. We place them surrounding the city. The township surrounds the city, and since the township bought them, we couldn't really put them in the city. So if you'll notice, they're right on the outskirts of each area of the city. Following that, the EMA director, Erie County, started their program. So I feel good that we were kind of the first to start that program. So during my career, I also did a lot of instructing. I was a fire instructor, I was a paramedic instructor. I was fortunate to be one of the first paramedics on the fire department. We transitioned from a BLS, a basic life support department, to an ALS, advanced life support. I was the EMS coordinator. I worked with both Drs. Babish and Nescoda to develop the protocols for the paramedic in the area. And you know, that was the next big step for us as a fire department, was to provide that next level of service. From there, you know, I did a lot of other things with instructing. I started the PSA Academy out at Yehovah, the Public Safety Academy. I worked with Tom Dunlap and Kelly Bodkin. They ran the police dispatch. I ran the EMT part, which was a good program for me. Again, another way to get youth involved in the department.
Members of the fire department were also members of the Huron Firemen's Association. They sponsored bloodmobiles, fire prevention events, an annual dance, and even a circus.
The Firefighters Association has played a real good role in the community. And when I first started, you know, that we were a non-union department. So the Firefighters Association was a way for the members, and not necessarily the officers of the department, to contribute back. Many key people involved with that. We've done a lot of donating over the years to Safety Town, to Huron's first canine dog, to this memorial that's over here that we placed in, I believe, 1990.
The group raised money for the department by holding rummage sales, chicken barbecues, and for many years, running a beer booth at the Huron Water Festival and the Riverfest.
We used to be funded through our sales at the Riverfest. We ran the beer tent, which was pretty lucrative at the time for what we were doing. But it came a time where we had to kind of reassess our values and morals, and you know, for firefighters to sell beer and then, you know, eventually possibly go pick them up in a car accident or something, which met with a little opposition from some members, because, you know, we were giving up some big money of what we could contribute back to the community. So since we decided not to do that, the association is still an organization today. They don't do as much, but they do still involve the members of the department as a way to still stay involved.
One of the most popular events were the water fights, held with area fire departments at the Water Festival and Riverfest.
At the festival, the firemen had water fights, and like all the fire department would get together, and each fire department that brought their trucks to the parade, which most of them all did, from Wakeman to Norwalk to
All
you
over.
name it, because those parades were huge. They would gather, and down at Lakefront Park was where the first water bucket fights were, and they would all gather and they had competition to see what fire department was the best or the strongest, or where they got trophies. And they would set a bucket up on a cable that went across to two poles that held it, and each department would get on one. They'd have about 6 guys from each department, one on one side and one on the other. They'd turn the water on. They had to go straight to the bucket. They held the bucket there with both water. It had to hold there for at least maybe a minute. And then all of a sudden they were allowed to start moving the water around and get that bucket to the other side. And whoever got that bucket to the side, let's say Huron was on the right-hand side, if the left side got it to the right side, they won.
The Fire Department and Firemen's Association were supported by the Fire Bells, an auxiliary organization comprised of the firemen's spouses. They raised money for the fire department and the community.
So my family has a long time history with the Huron Fire Department. My grandpa Fred Bose started as a fireman in 1941 and served through 1966. And along with that, my uncle George Smith, my grandpa's half-brother, also was a firefighter and served a number of years. I'm not exactly sure how many, but a long time. He was one of Huron's first full-time firefighters. And then came my dad, David. He started around 1962-ish through about 2003. And my uncle, his brother, Jim Bose, also was a firefighter. And even my dad's godfather, Wilbur Ramsey, was a firefighter, so long time history. The Fire Bells were an auxiliary group of the Huron Fire Department, and they were a really special group of women. They were eligible to be part of Fire Bells only because their husbands served as firefighters, and they were actually, Fire Bells was part of an association of Northwest Ohio Fire Department Association. They actually had a branch for the Women's Auxiliary. Fire Bells was the name that Huron chose. And from records that I found in the Huron Reporter, they began in 1959 and probably went through about 1981 is the last record I see. So kind of that transition when Huron started to have more full-time firefighters is when you saw them kind of go away. And the Fire Bells, it was a social group in that they would get together and offer support to one another. They were very civic-minded. They contributed to, and they had to raise their money too, that they made donations to. I found through some records in the Huron Reporter that they made trips to the Erie County Care Facility. They each adopted a member who lived there, and every year on that person's birthday, they would take a gift to that person. They made donations to Safety Town. They were involved in the efforts related to the 80s for the Christmas display that Huron put on. They donated money to that. They donated time and effort to raise money through craft bazaars and through the chicken barbecue that they had at the Water Festival. They contributed money to the Water Festival. But I think their biggest legacy was when Della Brown was president of the Fire Bells, and they raised $500 that they donated to purchase Huron's first Jaws of Life, which that was in the 70s, around 72. And the Jaws of Life total purchase price was $5,400. So that was a significant contribution that they made. And prior to that, they donated a medical bag. They raised money to donate a blood pressure cuff and a stethoscope. So they were really instrumental in making sure that the department had the equipment it needed.
As important as their fundraising efforts were, the main focus of the Fire Bells was to support the firemen when they were out on calls.
Here's what the Fire Bells would do. The phone, we had a phone that would ring instead of ringing sections like ding, ding, it rang continuously, the phone. That's when we knew there was a fire. None of us kids were allowed to answer the phone. It was either my mother or my dad. But of course your dad is getting ready to leave, okay? And so my mom would answer the phone and then maybe shout out to him where it's at, but half the time he was out the door, he didn't even, take the time to stay and listen. Because back then they were dedicated. They were volunteer. They all were very serious about what they did. And then the ladies would talk. It was a big party line, about, is this a working fire? What type of fire? Who's going to be the one to take the donuts, the coffee, or even the sandwiches if it was during supper or lunch, okay? And they would get their information on the phone, and then I remember sometimes my mom would say, come on you kids, get in the back of the station wagon, and she'd get the coffee ready. She would take the coffee. And you told me that you were on call, sort of, monthly or weekly. They knew who was going to do what.
Fireman's wife,
During the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, the members of the fire department developed close relationships among each other and their families. The children of the firefighters were affectionately referred to as the fire kids, and the firefighters and their wives shared an easy camaraderie, providing support and strength to one another.
I think a lot of the people who became part of the fire department, it was by association. Your neighbor's on it, why don't you? And boy, if the fire alarm or the squad went off on Adams Avenue, if you happened to be there riding your bike or walking, you better get off the street because they were coming. My dad, Leonard Dirks, Fred Mihalik, Jerry Franklin, Merle Bowman, Ken Wilford, Red Washburn, Bruce Oshosky, on it went, and you better get off the road if you wanted to be safe. And we just had fun. We had picnics, there was a clam bake, there was a picnic for families, we had Easter egg hunts, we had Christmas parties, we got to ride on the Blue Goose. It was just a lot of fun, as well as it was busy. There were trainings that parents attended. My dad, I remember being at trainings at least once a month. And I also remember just it being busy, like, oh, what night is it? Is Dad on? Is that his unit number? As well as the 6:30 p.m. testing of the signal for the Huron Fire Department, just to make sure everything was working.
They were the glue to the firemen families back then. We were all one big family, and this would be from the early 60s on to about the late 60s, early 70s. They had their own meeting time up in, this would be the old city building where the fire department station was. Upstairs, they had their meetings, and the firemen had their meetings separate. So they had their meetings where they would get together. I remember George Smith's wife, Barb, was the president then, but I remember that. I remember, then one year they organized, they were going to have their first fire queen in the parade, and my sister Cindy was picked to be the fire queen. They didn't know exactly how they were going to do this at first, so they just picked Cindy to be the fire queen. So they organized that, okay? The only thing, the fire bells were the glue to the families, and I say that a lot is because we wouldn't have gone to all these fun, it was fun, you know what I mean? But the fire department was volunteer at that time too, so they were very, nobody lived at the fire, nobody stayed at the fire station, so they pretty much had to go up there, and the fire bells were just leagues right behind them with everything they needed. So they were the backup as far as that goes, and and then I do remember this. I will tell you this. When they had to take coffee or that, if it was in the morning, if they were fighting a fire all night or something, they had to go early in the morning. Us kids, my mom would throw us in the back of the station wagon with our pillows and our blankets, and we actually went to the fire so they could get the coffee and the food to them. You didn't have babysitters much back then at the spur of the moment.
I never let my
and I remember one night, we didn't have school or anything. I think it was a weekend. We had to go to a fire they had been fighting early evening, and it was going to go on all night, and it was in Rye Beach. And 3 buildings burnt down, which I think they had a business underneath one at one time, and there were apartments on top. And I remember going to that, and I remember in the back of the station wagon waking up, and I remember seeing my dad come down the stairs with a little baby that did not make it. And, they were there to comfort the men, because this was one of the worst things I think I've ever seen with these men. They were tired. And I know my dad come home and he was really upset over that. And I mean, this is where they were there for their men, and I think that was admirable. I really do, what they did. And us kids, you know, hauling us there. Nowadays, you know, people would say, what in the heck are they, you know, but then that's what you did, you know. We saw the drowning. We saw a drowning, you know. We were taken to a drowning. I mean, Go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to tell about a fireman, those messenger bird girls that was in that accident. And Jerry, Rock, and Bill were the first on the squad.
It was terrible. They were pretty messed
They
up.
didn't have equipment, so they had a crowbar.
They just couldn't save them like they
They
wanted
had
to because they didn't
I
have the
can't.
high dollar, you know. And that, when that happened too, I remember that was something that, with the new squad and that was something too that that you guys, the fire bells and that, pretty much comforted the men in a lot of those type accidents, you know. And yeah, you know, I remember my mom hugging my dad and being there for him, and all of them were. And then the women would talk about it, you know, later when we got together and things, you know. So, you know, I don't know what happens now, but they were really thick sisters.
There were some unexpected advantages of being a fire kid.
In my teenage years, a lot of the I remember the fire department anybody go into a fire, then would have a light in their car, and they'd slide that sucker right up, and they'd throw it right up on top of the hood, and they'd turn their siren on in the car. Everybody had a siren, and they'd go to the fire, okay? And I'm not sure when the sirens in the car started, but I know that my dad had one, and everybody kind of had one in the car. But the light, everybody had a light. Well, my cousin Steve Lang, he had to live with us for a little bit.
He was in the service,
before he
remember?
went into the service.
The
Yes,
car stayed with
and
us.
he had a Chevette, and he was on the fire department, so he had his light and his siren and everything. Well, when he went to the service, he left his car at our house, and on my car one day, I was working at Cedar Point, and I was kind of late, and my car didn't start. Okay, so Mom
We
said,
said,
well, just
take
take the
Steve's.
Chevette, take Steve's car.
Steve's
So
car.
I did, and I got on the old Cedar Point Chaussee, because that's usually the way I went, and the traffic was just terrible. And, you know, you work 1 to 10, so you're going right at prime time. So I was looking at my watch, I'm going to be late, and all I thought was, wait a minute. So I turned the light on, and I threw it up on top of the car, and I turned the siren on, and I passed. I passed. Everybody
You
pulled
got in
over.
trouble, boy,
I know I
tell
would have,
you.
but I was desperate to
That
not
was
lose my
awful.
job.
She come home and told
I was
us
desperate
that.
to not lose my
Don't
job.
ever do that
and
again.
I know. And I got far enough into it where I could take it off, turn it off, and I looked around and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm gonna be busted, right? And I'd come home that night. And it took me a while to tell you, because I don't even think I told anybody right away.
No.
But when we were all laughing one day and having a few beers about something, and she was around, I had to let that out. And she says, "You what?"
Oh, man. Joe.
So sometimes you can take advantage of your dad being a fireman or your cousin.
God, I tell you, that was awful.
Although the Huron Fire Department has yet to hire a woman firefighter, the department did employ 4 women EMTs in the early 1980s during Chief Thomas's tenure.
It was actually Bill Thomas who hired the women as EMTs. Donna Neer was the first. My mom, Sarah Bose, was the second. Sue Patsky was the third, and Connie Popke was the fourth. And they all had numbers S1, S2, S3, and S4. And they are the only 4 women who've ever served as EMTs in the history of the Huron Fire Department.
I was working at McGarvey's restaurant in Vermilion as their office manager, head bookkeeper. And oftentimes we'd have people get burned in the kitchen, people would fall off their boats, people get injured, blah, blah, blah. And we had to call 911. At that time, the rescue squad was handled by the police department. Isn't that interesting? And it took forever sometimes for them to get there because they were maybe on taking care of a police matter. So I suggested to my boss, hey, you know, we need some people versed in first aid here. It would be helpful that we could stabilize, do something. So he said, that's a great idea, 2 from day shift, so to speak, and 2 from the evening shift. So I contacted the American Red Cross to see about a first aid course, and they didn't have anything at that time. And somebody suggested I give a call to Yehovah. Well, they had the EMT course, never realizing what I was getting into. So it was myself and another employee on days and 2 on the evening shift. Off we go, and we took our EMT course. Loved it. Part of that process in getting certified is we had to do squad runs with an area fire department. So I called Chief Phil Thomas, who was chief at that time, and asked if I could do my clinical experience with squad runs with Huron, and he was very gracious, and he said, yeah. And so I did that, and I knew this was something I wanted to do the rest of my life. Not being an EMT, but to go into healthcare. I wanted to go further. So as it turned out, I asked them at that time, was there any possibility I could do that as a volunteer? Because at that time, the fire department was all volunteer except for the day shift. And he said, no, there was no opportunity. And I can't tell you how many months later I get a phone call saying that there was an opportunity for myself and another woman who had also expressed interest to become squad members. Well, after talking to my husband, he said, go for it. So that started, and I was on Squad 3, and I was called S1, meaning squad member number 1. Sue was S2, Sarah was S3, and Connie was S4. They come on after Sue and I. And it was a wonderful experience. That prompted me to say, I want more. So then I went to school, become an LPN. And then I saw what the RNs were doing. I thought, oh, I'm going to do that too. And then I became an RN, and I had the most wonderful experience. I retired, 15 years ago, 16 years ago. It was a journey. It was hard for some of these guys to adjust to having 2 women on a department, and the wives also as well. And it took a lot of trust and faith for me to be out running around town at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know. But when that squad tone went off, I'm telling you, it was like it was a high, totally an adrenaline high, because you never knew what you were going to face, never. And I think that back then, even when we were volunteers, we provided a wonderful service to the people of the community. So when they went 24/7 after the levy passed, I kind of stepped back because they hired full-timers. And it was, at that time, I was in college getting my RN. So I was dividing myself in too many ways, you know, working, going to school, and I didn't need to do that anymore. So I was assigned to Squad 3. Captain George Smith was my squad captain. And there was 2 gentlemen and one of us girls on each assigned squad. And at first, Jimmy Johnson, I think, was our second gentleman on that firefighter on that squad. And then after he retired, I think John McKinnon was the other one. And he was young, and it was fun to watch him grow and develop over the years. Oh, I remember my very first motor vehicle accident. I'll never forget that if I live to be 100. It was July 3rd, July 4th. It was hot, humid, miserable, and the tone went off, and I can hear it go, bop, 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 bop. Tension here in squad. I remember that. And I had everything ready to go. You know, get out of bed, pull up my jeans, run downstairs. I had a little pinball machine on top of my little car, hop in the garage and take off and go. And it was an auto train accident. I'll never forget that if I live to be 100. The couple had a huge, I think it might have been a Lincoln or maybe a Cadillac, one of these big old boats, and went around the rails and got T-boned. And of course, it was horrific. It was really horrific. And the train stopped about a quarter mile down the tracks. And I remember going over there, and Jimmy Johnson turning around and looking at me, because I always sat in the back. He said, look it. He said, this is going to be your first big one. He said, it's going to be big. It was an auto train. He said, it's okay if you have to leave. And I thought, I'd die before I'd leave. You know, I was chewing gum at the time, and I tell you, you could have played marbles with that piece of gum when it was all said and done. So we get there, and we get out, and of course, the train had stopped. The car was absolutely severed in half. The front engine part was on the other side of the tracks, and it was like this, okay? So we all go down, and they pulled the car away from the train, because they were both dead. And it was a mess. And who do you think the smallest one in the whole department was? John said, Donna, can you go in there and get her out? And we put her in a body bag. And I'll never forget that. You know, it was total trust that he had in me to go in there and do that. And you know, it was awful. What I didn't know was my husband came over there. And he said if anything happened, he would take me home. He'd be my hero. Anyway, so it was all said and done. We get back, back to the squad. We cleaned up. We were out there probably 3-4 hours because they had to come in and pronounce them both dead and blah, blah, blah. And I walk in the house and he hands me a glass of scotch. He said, "You might want to drink this." I'm like, "I'm fine." But that was very interesting. Another run I always remember is we cut a guy down who committed suicide. He hung himself. Things happen, and people don't realize. Not only is it just the person themselves, the victim, the patient, it's the family that's involved. It's really hard. Another thing in my neighborhood was I was outside in the backyard, and I hear pop, and so what was that? That sounded like a gun. Well, I don't know what a gun sounds like. That sounded like a gun. Long story short, it was. My neighbor around the corner took a gun to his mouth. And I heard the squad come and I just went around the corner knowing that his wife had a heart condition. And while they're taking care of him, because he was still alive, she's having a big one. And I yelled, I said, "John, you better get another squad here. She's having a heart attack." I mean, those things you never forget, She was just so beside herself. And then you get the other side of the coin. Dan it, bah, 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 Huron squad. You take off, you go, and they're waiting at the front door with their luggage to go to the hospital. Seriously, I mean, that has happened, It's like taxi service. "Hi, can I help you, I'm Donna, what's going on?" "Well, I got this blah, blah, blah," and we take them off to the ER. And back in those days, we had three ERs to go to. We had Memorial, we had Providence, and of course we had Good Sam, which later became, Firelands. So it was always interesting, because at that time, the rule of thumb was you take them to the closest one, And that was the first time I experienced where I was wheeling in the patient with George and Jimmy J. That's what we call Jimmy Johnson. And they told me to go wait in the lobby or the waiting room because they thought I was with the family. And George said, "No, she's one of us." And I think they were shocked because the hospitals did not realize at that time that Huron was running ladies on the squad. I did have one child had an obstructed airway, and I asked the gentleman, the dad was all bent out of shape. I said, "Do you have a pair of, what do you call those pliers with the long tip?" Got that and pulled it out. Yeah, I was right to the house because the tone went off and I knew it was my neighbor. And the rule of thumb was you go until the squad gets there. Do what you can. And the kid was starting to turn blue. It was just about 3 or 4 year old. I just took them pliers and pulled that baby right out.
One thing that I really appreciate about the era of the 60s and 70s and into the 80s of the Huron Fire Department was that this was a volunteer organization, and these were men and women who had full-time jobs, who had a deep commitment to their community. Because I'm pretty sure they didn't do it for the money that they got for each squad call that they did, which was maybe $1, $1.50, something like that back in the day. But they had other full-time jobs, but they felt really committed to the people that lived in the city of Huron. So my dad, David Bose, was a plumber, worked with his dad, Fred, at Bose Plumbing and Heating, and that was his full-time job. And my mom, Sarah, she started out working as a secretary for Bose Plumbing and Heating, but then by the time she served as an EMT, she was working for Huron City Schools, and she became a math teacher. She probably was working as an office aide first, and then later finished school and became a math teacher for Huron City Schools, and she remained an EMT for all the time that she was a math teacher. And she would tell us stories sometimes about hearing a siren go off, and if it were near the end of the day, if it seemed like something she needed to go to, she would get somebody to cover her class occasionally for a big call, and she would go and help too. So, big community effort. Somebody else had to take her place. Yeah, I think the women came at a time where, Huron had expanded their fire department and their unit and their squads. And I think my guess is that maybe the chief felt that there was still just an element that was missing, or maybe some women started to express some interest. I can imagine that it couldn't have been an easy time for women to serve. It was definitely a man's world at the Huron Fire Department. And I know that my mom was protected from a lot of that because my dad, David Bose, was a firefighter. But some of the women, the other 3 that served, weren't as lucky, and I'm sure it was very hard for them. Plus there was a change in who the chief was too. And I think that, there's that getting to know each other period. However, all that said, I think the women brought a side of compassion and caring and caregiving. You can imagine that if women were the person who needed attention, that having a woman there to care for them probably brought a lot of comfort. I imagine that as they processed difficult calls or fires, that the women being there too were able to give a different perspective that helped them to process some of the emotions and feelings that they might be going through, or even psychologically some of the things that were, heavy on their minds and their hearts. So I really appreciate that Huron had those women to do that. And in today's world, we know that diversity is something that really improves care overall in healthcare, and I think those 4 women were pioneers in the city of Huron in bringing that to the station.
In 2005, the division received a grant from the Department of Homeland Security to replace the Boston Whaler. Purchased in 2007, the new boat was a 30-foot Northwind Marine Argus custom-built aluminum boat to be used for firefighting, rescue, and recovery operations. The division was able to save money on the purchase by partnering with the Sandusky Fire Department to design identical hulls. This addition provided a more stable platform with more capabilities than the Boston Whaler.
I was very fortunate over those 5.5, almost 6 years I was chief to acquire some funding through FEMA's Firefighters Assistance Grant Program. One of the first things I wanted to work on was improvement of the fireboat. So it's a very competitive process, the grant program, so I had to find something unique. So at the time, Assistant Chief Paul Ritchie over at Sandusky was working on developing a new fireboat for them. They were looking at replacing it. So it was very good timing. So we worked on 2 sister boats, identical. Because another part of what I was trying to accomplish was standardization of equipment. Dive equipment, boat equipment. If we're going to work together, we might as well have the same equipment to make it easy for the transition of people. So we went together. I was fortunate to receive a $308,000 grant, which cost the city and the township, I believe, about $17,000, and we got the boat. It was a great addition. It gave us a platform to work on emergency personnel, a good platform for dive resources. The uniqueness of it was that it's not just powered by the outboards, but it also has a jet drive. So if you're working dive operations, you can use the jet drive, no props in the water, no one get hurt. And the jet drive was reversible, so then you can use that as the fire pump too. So we found this company out of Seattle, Northwind Marine, which developed this, and the boat is still in existence today and still running well. It was a great addition to the department to replace a 22-foot Boston Whaler, and we all know how these legs can kick up. So.
In 2008, Chief Berlin purchased his military service credit through the pension system and announced his retirement at the end of that year. Captain Steve Osterling was named acting chief of the division. At the end of 2009, City Council passed an ordinance to designate the fire division a fire department. This change allowed acting Chief Osterling to be appointed as chief of the department. An agreement with the union allowed Chief Osterling to remain on shift as the officer in charge to reduce expenses. At the end of 2015, Chief Osterling retired from the Huron Fire Department after 34 years of service. During his employment, he witnessed many changes to the department and the fire service. He, along with former Chief Paul Berlin, was one of the first paramedics in the Erie County area and maintained his certification until his last year as chief. During his tenure, he was responsible for hiring 5 new full-time firefighters and oversaw the purchase of 5 new apparatus. In 2017, the city and township expanded the Joint Fire Services Agreement to better serve the entirety of the jurisdiction. The township fire station on Bogart Road, now referred to as Station 2, was expanded, and the number of full-time employees was increased from 12 to 15. The project was completed in 2019 and includes a designated museum room to house the Blue Goose and the Huron Fire Department memorabilia. Because of the COVID pandemic, the dedication of the building and station was postponed until October 2023. That day, the Huron Fire Department also celebrated 150 years of service to Huron and Huron Township. Today, the fire department consists of 15 full-time members and several part-time members. 5 full-time firefighters are assigned to each shift. Station 1 is staffed with a captain and 2 firefighters. Station 2 is staffed with a lieutenant and a firefighter. Part-time personnel augment the full-time staff during sick leave, vacation, or education time, and all staff can be recalled to their stations for larger incidents as needed. Captains include Mike Holler, Kurt Schaefer, and Doug Nash, and the lieutenants include Chris Folger, Bill Everett, and Dan Soyson. Volunteer firefighters continue to assist full-time firefighters. During the past few decades, the Huron Fire Department has had to grapple with several memorable fires, rescues, and recoveries. One of the most notable incidents was in August of 1967, when 19 parachutists were accidentally dropped on a cloudy, windy afternoon over Lake Erie, 8 miles northeast of the Huron Lighthouse, missing their intended land target. The Huron Dispatch received a request to call the Erie County Water Rescue Team as well as the Huron Yacht Club for assistance from boat owners. Fighting 5-foot waves and time, Huron and Vermilion agencies, boat owners, the Coast Guard, as well as Army and Navy helicopters assisted in the search and rescue. The 53-hour event was covered by over 80 national and international journalists. 2 of the 19 parachutists survived, losing the other 17 to Lake Erie. In February of 1981, the Solberg family's Huron Lagoons Marina, located alongside the Huron River, suffered $150,000 in damages when the showroom, offices, and restaurant went up in flames. The origin of the fire was traced to the showroom. Firefighters were able to pump water from the river to battle the fire. None of the boats stored on the marina's grounds were damaged. 5 years later, in 1986, the Huron Fire Department was called to assist the Sandusky Fire Department in extinguishing the fire at the Point Retreat condominium. One of the city's largest fires occurred in 1990 at the Lake House condominiums under construction on Cleveland Road West. A December 1990 Reporter article noted that it took the entire efforts of the Huron Fire Department and the help of the Sandusky Fire Department to contain the fire. A large portion of the structure burned, causing an estimated $600,000 in damages. The nearby Oakshire condominiums were saved, but the heat of the fire was so hot that doorbells melted, making it difficult to get the attention of the residents during the evacuation. The cause of the fire was careless smoking by the construction workers.
They were under construction. The Lake House condo fires happened when they were under construction. They had one building that was framed in and drywalled. The building that caught on fire was just framed in. So what you have is a lumber yard that's standing up. And it had plenty of fuel, it had plenty of air. And I mean, we did stop it at the firewalls. When it was constructed, it required to have firewalls every 12 units. And we stopped it at the 2 firewalls. So, but it was well underway when we got called. And it was in the early evening that we got the call. But the middle part burned almost to the ground, but the firewall stopped the fire. We had a lot of damage to the condos beside of it, the apartments beside of it, because of the heat. But there was no structural damage.
On December 28, 2000, the Twine House restaurant on North Main Street caught fire. About 70 firefighters fought all night through freezing temperatures, but were unable to save the original building, which was a fish and twine bar built in the late 1800s that had been converted into the restaurant.
Twine House fire was real close to New Year's Eve, or the night before New Year's Eve, and it came in. It came in like at midnight or a little bit before that, and it came in as an alarm at the Harbor House. The history of the fire department is you get all kinds of automatic alarms. The smoke detector goes off, something happens, and they called. I was at home, but the shift on duty was on their way down there. And the dispatcher called back and said, "This is an automatic alarm. You don't have to respond." The owner called and said you don't have to respond because they know it's an automatic alarm and it was false alarm. They went anyway because we learned that a long time ago. Anybody can call you and tell you not to show up, and you show up anyway, just to make sure. And they showed up, and when they showed up, they said they had a working fire. So that kind of, everybody responded then. I think we had like 75 firefighters. I called mutual aid from Sandusky, Vermilion, Norwalk, Perkins, I think Groton. I mean, we called everybody we could call just to get more people there. It was cold that night. We had a good water supply because that day, and this is just how things happen, that day we got a call from the Coast Guard, and they wanted to know if we want them to open the river. In the winter, a lot of times we'll have them open the river just so we don't have ice flows in it. And that day they opened the river, so we had I think Perkins and one Sandusky engine went to the river and drafted. They put their hard suction in, and so we had plenty of water. And again, the fire was stopped at the firewalls. It stopped at the hotel, and it stopped at the old twine house. So we had a lot of things going for us that night. Not a lot of wind, plenty of water, and a lot of help. It burned. But again, what you have to remember, it was a twine house. It was a twine house. We pre-planned that building many times. Well, when you pre-plan, you go down and you flow water out of the hydrants to say, okay, we've got 1,000 gallons a minute from that hydrant. We've got 300 gallons a minute from this hydrant. So everybody knows where the good hydrants are at. We knew which way to go, like around, if we went around. They went down Williams to Park Street and around, Park Street, Wall Street. And so everything worked perfect on our end. It's just, it was a twine house. And it's hard to stop a fire in a twine house because the twine and the tar, it just impregnated everything. So I was happy with how we stopped it. I was happy nobody got hurt. That was the key to it. We had guys inside of it the first 15 minutes. And then finally we got to a point where we just pulled everybody out and went defensive. Which defensive means you pour water in from the outside. You don't send anybody in the building.
One of the biggest challenges the Huron Fire Department faced was the Nickel Plate Beach swimming rescue on July 10, 2002. The beach was always been vulnerable to wind, waves, and strong currents. Although the waves were 4 to 6 feet high that day, several swimmers were undeterred and entered the water. They soon were overpowered by the waves and unable to reach the shore. Several firefighters tried to rescue the swimmers with the department's 22-foot Boston Whaler, but the boat swamped when firefighters had to rescue 2 other firefighters who were trying to save one of the swimmers. 10 Sandusky and Huron firefighters donned life jackets and attached themselves to a rope, forming a 125-foot human chain in an attempt to find 4 missing swimmers. The Perkins Fire Department, a Coast Guard cutter, and helicopters soon arrived, but the rescue mission turned into one of recovery. It was a sad day in the history of Erie County, but not surprising as so many visitors come to Huron unfamiliar with the fierceness of Lake Erie and the dangers of rip currents. This was one of the most memorable days of Chief Zimmerman's career.
2002, the drownings at Nickel Plate, we lost 4 swimmers. It was really, really rough that day. I mean, really rough. And about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we got a call for a possible drowning at Nickel Plate. And we responded there. I called right away. I called mutual aid from Sandusky and we took our boat out. Probably shouldn't have taken the boat out because it was so rough, but the operator that we had on our boat was one of our best, Steve Dirks. And we ended up having to run the boat aground because we had 2 firemen. We had 2 firemen that almost drowned that day. Monty Tapp came from his house and rescued the girl. I don't remember her name, but rescued the girl. And then we were bringing the boat in to get Monty and the girl, and one of the firefighters on the boat jumped in to help him. And we ended up just beaching the boat, and both of them were good. They had to go to the hospital and didn't stay overnight, but and we ended up realizing after we got the 2 firefighters back up on the beach that there were 3 people, or 4 other people missing. And Coast Guard was en route. They had a helicopter en route. They had their 47-foot boat en route. And we did a human chain as much as we could, because I bet we had 6 to 7 foot waves. And what we ended up recovering this was on a Wednesday, and we ended up recovering 1 on Saturday, 1 Saturday morning, 1 Saturday afternoon, and then 2 on Sunday. And they were young guys that shouldn't have gone in the water. And the city's changed a lot of things from nickel plate since then. We had a number of near misses and drownings at nickel plate over the years, and it's just the way it is. It's the East Pier, it's the waves coming from the north and northeast and hitting the East Pier and just taking everything out. And I think one came up on the beach, and the rest of them we found out in the water. Our boat recovered the other 3 because it was 2 days later. But for 2 days, or 3 days later, but for 2 days, we had Coast Guard here, our boat out. We had a couple of pleasure boaters that we knew that had side scan sonar. We had them out there. We had our dive team out there. The lake is going to do what it wants to do. They put a flag system there. Now, when it gets rough off the north or northeast, the fire radios go off just to notify the fire department that it's rough, and the police department. They have they have a flag system. They have their Parks and Rec people trained a little bit better, that they can tell people to stay out of the water. There's some boxes down there, I think, that have safety equipment in them. So they made changes, and you can only do so much. And in the lake, it's like I said, it's the lake. It's beautiful. You know what I mean? And if you don't know it, you just got to be careful. Most of the people that during my career that drowned or got in trouble were literally from south of here. They don't know the lake. It's beautiful. It looks really fun. But once you get in trouble in the lake, usually there's no going back. It's not like, even the fire department we have, and as quick as they respond, by the time you get the boat out there and by the time you get guys on the beach, it's 10, 12, 15 minutes. And you don't have a lot of time if you're in trouble on the lake.
Several other drownings have occurred at Nickel Plate Beach over the years, including 2 separate drownings in July of 2019, resulting in the closing of the beach for 2 weeks. Huron's West Pier and Lighthouse are a popular attraction for residents and visitors alike. On June 9th, 2019, around 7 p.m., 19-year-old Henry Stout of Reynoldsburg was swept off the pier while walking to the lighthouse. Crews from the Huron Fire Department and U.S. Coast Guard tried to rescue him from both the shore and by boat, but conditions on the water were extremely rough, with 6 to 8 foot waves. The search was called off around midnight due to the weather conditions. The search did not resume until 4 p.m. the next day, when it was deemed safe for divers to enter the water. Stout was found an hour later, near where he was knocked into the water. Although quite a few of the fire department's calls are for ambulance runs, firefighters still must be prepared to fight fires, as demonstrated on the night of April 1st, 2024, when the Swanbeck K house burned.
On April 1st, 2024, we had a call for a house fire in Huron, and turns out it was probably one of the oldest houses in the Old Platte. The call came in to the fire department somewhere around 10:45 to, it was about, I think I got to IM responding at 10:50 and responded out here to this station and then to the scene, and I got there at about 11, and it was fully involved at 11 o'clock at night, and we were still chasing fire and trying to put it out at 8 o'clock the next morning, because with these older houses, one, they're balloon construction, which means that the walls are open a lot of times from the basement all the way to the attic. And then when they remodel some of these older houses, they put new roofs on top of old roofs. and you can't, and what happens is the fire will come up the walls and it'll get in between the roof and the old roof, and it hides in there. And unless you can get to it, you can cut holes to physically get into it to put the fire out, you'll chase it back and forth all the time. And the house or the fire was bad enough that it compromised. They started with an interior attack, which is what we do. We send guys in air packs. They go in and they find the seat of the fire and put it out. Usually, I mean, our first priority is life safety. Second priority is taking care of, well, life safety for us, for victims of the fire, and then protecting property as much as we can. And unfortunately, the conditions they were probably in there for an hour trying to fight the fire from the inside. It got to be where the floor was compromised. A couple of guys fell through the floor a couple of times. I mean, nothing serious, but so they had to pull everybody out, and then we had to go to a defensive attack, which means we go from the outside and pour water on it and cut holes in the roof, whatever we can do. And unfortunately, with the way the construction was and the remodeling, we couldn't get to a lot of the fire. And that ultimately, that's what cost the house to be a total loss. It just, there was nothing we could do. I mean, we probably put upwards of 100,000 gallons of water on this fire to finally get it out. And when I got done, I went to work the next day about 8 o'clock, and the guys were there until 5, 6 o'clock that night, still trying to put out hot spots. I mean, the fire was under control. It wasn't going to get out of control, but there were still spots that the fire was hiding inside these areas that I was talking about with the construction.